In this episode, we're going to make logging and monitoring feel like a practical way to reduce uncertainty rather than an overwhelming flood of technical data that only specialists can interpret. Logging is the act of recording what happened in a system, and monitoring is the act of paying attention to those records and signals in a way that helps you detect problems and respond. In payment environments, this matters because many serious incidents do not start with a dramatic crash. They start with a quiet misuse of access, a stolen credential, or a subtle change that goes unnoticed. If you cannot see what is happening, you are forced to rely on assumptions, and assumptions are exactly what attackers exploit. The phrase "events that matter most" is important because not every event deserves equal attention, and beginners often think logging means capturing everything forever. In reality, the goal is to capture the right signals with enough detail to investigate and to monitor them in a way that produces actionable awareness rather than constant noise. When you learn to focus on what matters most, logging becomes a tool for clarity and confidence, not an endless data warehouse. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A strong starting point is to understand what an access event is, because access is not only a successful login. Access events include successful authentication, failed authentication, privilege changes, creation and deletion of accounts, password resets, changes to MFA settings, and attempts to access sensitive data or administrative functions. They also include system-to-system access, such as service accounts calling APIs or systems connecting to databases. In many environments, the highest risk events are not normal activity but unusual patterns, like repeated failed logins, access from unexpected locations, or a user account suddenly touching systems they never use. For beginners, it helps to see access events as the footprints left behind by identity and permission use. If a person or system touches something, that touch should leave a trace you can follow later. The key idea is that you are not logging because you enjoy records. You are logging so you can answer questions when something looks wrong. Without those traces, you can be breached and not even know how it happened. To make monitoring effective, you need a clear definition of what matters most in your environment. In a cardholder data context, the most important assets are the systems that store, process, or transmit sensitive data and the systems that control them. That means authentication servers, administrative consoles, databases, payment applications, network security devices, and management interfaces are often high priority. The events that matter most are those that indicate access to these assets, changes to how they are protected, or behavior that suggests someone is trying to bypass controls. Beginners sometimes think monitoring is about catching every bad action in real time, but a more realistic goal is early detection of high-impact risks. You want a small set of signals that reliably indicate danger, such as unauthorized access attempts, unusual privileged activity, or unexpected changes to security settings. When you focus on those signals, you reduce alert fatigue and increase the chance that real issues get attention. Log quality matters as much as log quantity, because logs that lack context are difficult to use. A useful access log typically answers questions like who, what, when, where, and how. Who means the user or system identity, including a unique identifier that can be tied to a real account. What means the action performed, such as login attempt, permission change, or access to a sensitive resource. What means a timestamp, and that timestamp must be trustworthy and consistent across systems so events can be correlated. Where can mean the source device, the network location, or other context that helps you understand whether the access makes sense. How can include the authentication method, such as whether MFA was used or which application or interface was involved. Beginners often underestimate how important timestamps are until they try to reconstruct an incident across multiple systems and realize time drift makes the story incoherent. Tight logging requires time synchronization, so the record of events can actually be used to build a timeline. Another important concept is that monitoring is a process, not just a dashboard. If logs are collected but nobody reviews them, or if alerts are generated but ignored, the system exists only on paper. Effective monitoring means defining who is responsible for reviewing alerts, how quickly they must respond, and what actions they can take when something looks suspicious. It also means defining what counts as normal and what counts as abnormal, because without those definitions, every alert becomes a debate. For beginners, it helps to think of monitoring like a smoke detector. The detector is valuable only if it is installed correctly, tested, and connected to a response that actually happens when it goes off. If it chirps constantly because it is poorly tuned, people will ignore it. A monitoring program that matters is one that produces signals people trust and respond to consistently. Privilege is a major focus area for access logging because privileged activity can change the security posture of an entire environment. Privileged actions include creating users, granting permissions, changing configurations, disabling protections, and accessing sensitive data repositories. These are the actions attackers want because they turn a small foothold into full control. Logging privileged actions is essential, but it is equally important to monitor for unusual privilege behavior, such as a privileged account being used outside normal hours or from an unusual device. Another critical signal is privilege escalation, where a normal account becomes privileged unexpectedly. Beginners sometimes assume monitoring is mainly about external attackers, but insiders and compromised internal accounts can produce the same risky patterns. The core point is that you monitor privilege because privilege is leverage. If you can see the moments when leverage is gained and used, you can intervene before the damage spreads. Failed access attempts are another high-value signal because repeated failures can indicate guessing, password spraying, or attempts to break into accounts. A single failed login might be a typo, but patterns matter, such as many failures across many accounts or repeated failures on a high-value account. Monitoring can also look for failures followed by a success, which can suggest an attacker finally got the right credential. For beginners, it is useful to think of failed attempts as knocks on the door. One knock might be harmless, but a series of knocks at odd times or on many doors can indicate someone is testing the neighborhood. If your monitoring cannot see these patterns, you might miss the early stage of an attack when it is easiest to stop. Good monitoring turns repeated failures into a chance to act before an attacker gets in. Monitoring access to sensitive data is another key idea, and it is more nuanced than just logging database queries. Sensitive data can be accessed through applications, administrative tools, reports, exports, and backups. The goal is to log meaningful access events such as viewing, exporting, or modifying sensitive records, especially when those actions are unusual for the user's role. You also want to log access to systems that can indirectly expose sensitive data, such as file shares containing exports or backup storage locations. Beginners sometimes assume that if the application is the only approved access path, then logging the application is enough, but attackers often seek alternative paths, like pulling data directly from storage or using administrative interfaces. If you only log the approved path, you may miss the actual theft. Monitoring that matters most covers both the expected paths and the high-risk alternative paths. Change events deserve special attention because many breaches become possible when security settings are changed quietly. Changes to firewall rules, logging configurations, authentication settings, access control lists, and encryption settings can all weaken protections. Attackers often try to disable logs or reduce visibility early in an intrusion because they want to operate without being seen. Monitoring should flag changes to logging itself, changes to alerting rules, and changes to time settings, because these can undermine your ability to detect and investigate. Beginners may not realize that log tampering can be as damaging as data theft because it destroys evidence. This is why monitoring is often designed to send logs to a protected location rather than leaving them only on the system where they were generated. The goal is to preserve integrity of the record. When you can trust your logs, you can trust your conclusions during an investigation. Retention and protection of logs is another area that makes monitoring meaningful rather than superficial. Logs must be retained long enough to support detection and investigation, because some attacks unfold slowly and may not be discovered immediately. Logs also contain sensitive information about systems and behavior, so they must be protected from unauthorized access and tampering. Beginners sometimes think logs are harmless, but logs can reveal usernames, system structure, and sometimes sensitive data if logging is poorly designed. So tight logging practice includes ensuring logs do not capture sensitive values unnecessarily and ensuring access to logs is restricted. It also includes ensuring logs are available when needed, because an incident is the worst time to discover your logs were overwritten or never collected. Retention is not about hoarding. It is about maintaining enough history to see patterns and reconstruct events when it matters. Another teaching beat is the idea of tuning and reducing noise, because monitoring that produces constant false alarms is effectively broken. In payment environments, many systems generate large volumes of routine events that are not meaningful from a security perspective. If you alert on everything, people will quickly become numb, and real threats will be missed. Tuning means selecting thresholds, focusing on high-risk assets, and building correlation logic that turns raw events into meaningful signals. For beginners, the lesson is that a good monitoring program is not the loudest one. It is the one that produces the clearest and most actionable alerts. This often requires iterative improvement, where alerts are reviewed, false positives are understood, and rules are refined. Tuning is also a governance activity because it requires someone to decide what risk is acceptable and what signals deserve attention. The end result should be a monitoring experience that people can sustain every day. As you bring all of these concepts together, logging and monitoring access events that matter most becomes a disciplined approach to visibility and response. You define what access events are, including logins, privilege changes, and sensitive data touches, and you make sure the logs include enough context to answer who, what, when, where, and how. You focus on high-value assets and high-impact signals so monitoring is practical and does not drown in noise. You treat monitoring as a process with clear ownership and response expectations, because alerts are only valuable when acted on. You monitor privileged actions and failed attempts because those are common early indicators of compromise. You watch for changes to security settings and changes to logging itself because attackers often try to blind you before they steal. You protect and retain logs so you can trust them and use them to reconstruct events. When these pieces are in place, you are not guessing about what happened in your environment. You are building the ability to know, and that is the foundation of confident security.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.